Yo everyone, welcome to my predictions and breakdown of the entire UFC Fight Night Burns vs Morales fight card. There's actually a few very solid fights on this card, so pretty keen to jump into talking about this one. But before we do get into this video, like I always do, let's quickly go back and talk about how we did on the previous fight card, which was UFC 315, Muhammad vs Della Maddalena, and oh my god guys, this was probably one of the best main event championship fights I have seen for a good while. Although I think Jack brought the heat, Bilal needs to get some respect for being a part of an absolute back and forth banger. You couldn't ask for much more from them. Jack was even hunting for the finish up until the 5th round when the bell went off. It was an incredible performance from our new welterweight champion, Jack Della Maddalena, and I am keen to see how he does in his first title defense against the pound-for-pound king, Islam Makhachev. If you want to see more on my thoughts on the main event, I've got a video here for you guys where I talk all about it. On picks, we went 8-4, which is pretty solid, but on bets, we absolutely smashed it out of the park this week since we were backing the two main and co-main event underdogs with large bets. Here are all my bets, and the ones in green are the ones that paid out. Overall results for the bets are now on screen. We made a profit of 5.66 units on the card overall for a percentage profit of 80.86% on our bets. I will be posting the full card betting guide video for this card later on this week, so make sure you keep an eye out for that video if you want to know what my personal bets for the card are and what all my betting tips for the card are as well. I also want to talk about the subscribers bet of the week. I want you guys to go into the comment section below and let me know what your favorite bets are for this card, and I will be taking one person's bets to add to the betting guide for this week. This bet may be a specific bet I like, or even the top comment with the most likes on the video. If you think you've got a solid bet in mind, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, and you may see your comment and bet in the newest betting guide as an addition to the bets. Anyways guys, to finally jump into the video, I'll be starting with the prelims and working my way all the way to the main event. Timestamps are in the description and the comment section below if you want to skip to any fight in particular. We're going to be starting with the first fight of the card, which is Luana Pinheiro versus Tecia Pennington. And I don't know why they're doing this with these odds. They really don't want you making any money off of Tecia Pennington as a favorite in this fight. I think the majority of the time, though, Tecia Pennington should win this one. And this could pretty much just be based on solely the cardio aspect, since I do see Luana Pinheiro slowing down a lot in the second and third rounds of her fights. The girls fight pretty similar, honestly. Both prefer the boxing range in their fights, but if I had to favor one of them, I think Tecia Pennington will edge it out in the technical aspect of the fight. Odds should be a lot closer, though. I'd give Tecia Pennington maybe a minus 250 favorite in my odds, in my opinion. I think we're going to see a closer first round. Then as it gets into the second and third, we're going to see Tecia Pennington take over with her volume and get the win by decision here. I'm going to say maybe 29-28 decision win for Pennington. And when you look at their fights, although both girls are only losing to top-level fighters now, Tecia Pennington arguably didn't even lose her fights, especially her fight with Tabitha Ricci, with her 2 losses coming by split decision. Whereas Luana Pinheiro really is struggling just not to get finished by some of the better fighters in the division, especially when she starts to get tired and slower later on in the fight. Enough of that though, Tecia Pennington is the pick by decision. Moving on to Hyun Park versus Carlos Hernandez. And now this is a bit of a tougher one for me, since Hyun Park is relatively untested, 9-0 prospect, but he has been showcasing a very well-rounded game with some slick techniques in the striking. Watching him attack the body and finish Shannon Ross with that left hook was beautiful. The man does mix it up quite well on the feet, but he's only 9-0. But Carlos Hernandez, he just seems to be one of my favorite underdogs to pick, since in a couple of his losses, he's shown a great ability to scramble and get out of bad positions in the wrestling and BJJ department, and he's quite slick on the feet too. This will be a matchup where both guys are extremely well-rounded, but in the flyweight division, that is pretty common because most of the fighters are pretty slick everywhere. The only thing that is discouraging me from locking in Carlos Hernandez will be the massive, and I mean massive, power disadvantage and finishing potential on the feet. It's the exact same point I made when not picking Brad Katona over Beksat Almakhan, which was a fight on the last card, and I was correct in that line of thinking, which was that in the close pick where both guys are solid, damage trumps all and power tends to shine through in certain moments. And Hyun Park, although he hasn't versed the level of competition that Carlos Hernandez has, I believe he should be able to get this win in this matchup by out-damaging Carlos Hernandez and keeping this one on the feet for the most part. I don't see too much grappling taking place here. I think this will be a majority stand-up fight, so I'm going to say that Hyun Park potentially gets a KO in the early rounds of this fight, or maybe he wins a decision 29-28, potentially losing the second or third rounds. That's my pick. Moving on to Denise Gomes versus Elise Reed. And these odds are starting to really piss me off. I think maybe the odds makers just know shit that we don't know. That's what I'm starting to think about, honestly, because they had Corey Sandhagen as like a -1 billion favorite over Figure. I'm joking, of course, but he was a big favorite. And I was like, you know, that's pretty disrespectful to Figueiredo. It should be a lot closer than that. And then he just goes out there and absolutely dominates the guy and then finishes him, obviously with a little bit of an asterisk there because of the injury, but maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about with a lot of these picks. But regardless, what I've seen regarding these two girls, I will favor Denise Gomes to get this one done, but I do think Elise Reed is super underrated. She's got solid striking, she's got a great jab in particular, she can keep up the pace for the whole fight, and she moves pretty well on the outside. Her losses are to great fighters as well. Lupita Godinez, Loma Lukbunmi, and even a loss to Sam Hughes isn't terrible since Sam Hughes was fraud-checking so many fighters in the UFC. She's even got a win over Jasmine Jasudavicius over in the CFFC, I believe, before coming to the UFC. She's not a pushover, guys. She does have a weakness against solid grapplers and against fighters just with good wrestling in general. I think a fighter with like an Eileen Perez's skill set would take her out in my opinion, but I'm just using her skill set as an example because I think Eileen Perez is up a weight class, but I do think that's where Denise Gomes will make the difference here. I think her power is always a great equalizer in the exchanges, but she does look quite strong and could be able to work Elise Reed in the clinch and potentially drag her down to the mat to start securing some ground and pound. I think striking wise, Denise Gomes will have to close the distance a bit since Elise Reed prefers to stay long with her strikes, but the reach is quite similar, so I don't think it will be too much of an issue here. Don't be surprised to see me throwing some sort of bet on Elise Reed, though. I really do think she's being a bit underestimated in this matchup, but it might be that particular bet. What's that bet where a fighter only has to win like one round on every judge's scorecards? If I can get that sort of bet, I'll be chucking something on that for sure, because I really do think she can do it. Denise Gomes is the pick, though. Moving on to Luana Santos versus Tainara Lisboa. I thought this fight was close on the odds, but I just saw that Tainara Lisboa has dropped right down and is now a pretty decent sized underdog, but honestly, I really have no clue why. I actually think she wins this fight a good portion of the time, especially if she can avoid the judo throws and wrestling of Luana Santos. I think although her output is usually quite low, Tainara Lisboa is the better striker in this matchup. She's got a pretty solid jab, her kicks are nice, and she just looks calm and relaxed in the striking, where Luana Santos, in my opinion, reacts way too harshly to getting struck, and she tends to look a little too sloppy in some exchanges. I could see Lisboa mixing in her own takedowns in this one, but if she just focuses on keeping this fight on the feet and keeping her output a little higher, I think she could be in for a relatively easier win for herself. Underdog pick in Tainara Lisboa. Moving on to Conor Matheus versus Yadier del Valle. And you know, the thing I hate about these fights is that when there's a guy that's a really big favorite, a lot of the time, they just end up making like that UFC debuter this massive favorite. That's usually the guy that's the big favorite in these sort of matchups, and I really do hate that shit. Watching the fight tape and seeing both these guys in action, I do think this is a circumstance where I agree that Yadier del Valle should be able to get it done over Conor Matheus, but I do think the odds should be a lot closer than what they are right now. I think that del Valle could potentially have a rougher time in there if he doesn't get Matheus out of there early, but in saying that, as well, I've been thinking about it. Del Valle's pace and pressure that he puts on will be an insane pace for both fighters to handle, so Conor Matheus will most likely be a bit sloppy later on too. I also think that, although I do think Conor Matheus is better than what the odds are showing, it is true that he is a little chinny and he has been knocked out in back-to-back fights recently. But if I had to be brutally honest, both guys are quite open in the striking at times, and I know that Del Valle is a bit more durable. He's the more durable of the two. It is important to mention because they are most likely going to be getting in some brawl-type exchanges. I could see Yadier finding that shot as well in this fight, but he is an insane knockout artist. That's why I don't understand these odds. I wonder how the grappling exchanges are going to go in this fight as well. It's a very interesting matchup. I would like the odds to be closer than what they are. I'll still be picking the favorite in Yadier Del Valle to get this one done, most likely by KO or decision. Moving on to Jared Gordon versus Thiago Moises. And you know, guys, I've actually debated on doing a video on Jared Gordon for a while now. It was going to be something like, is Jared Gordon the most unlucky fighter, or is Jared Gordon the most bad done by fighter? Something along those lines, just because it seems like he just could have had a completely different career path if he received the wins that he deserved. You know, beat Paddy Pimblett, robbed of a decision. Beat Nasrat Haqparast, in my opinion, in his most recent fight, robbed of a decision. Even in his no contest to Bobby Green, he got what looked like intentionally headbutt, and then he ended up receiving the most vicious ground and pound imaginable off an illegal strike. I'm rooting for the dude, guys, no matter what, and in this matchup, I will be going with Jared Gordon to get this one done. I believe he is the underdog as well, or at least he opened as the underdog, but the odds are getting closer to even. I think the odds might actually end up flipping by the end of it as well. I reckon Jared Gordon will probably be the favorite by the end of it. I think his activity on the feet with his boxing is what's going to be the difference maker in this fight with Thiago Moises. I think Moises is great. He has solid low kicks and is overall a very well-rounded fighter, but he just lacks output, and Jared Gordon isn't afraid of applying pressure and letting his hands go. So like I said, that is what I believe will be the difference maker in this fight. Jared's not that easy to take down as well, and I think Thiago Moises will try at least a few times in this fight to get the takedown when the action on the feet is not going his way. I think Jared Gordon keeps it on the feet and wins a decision. Hopefully he just doesn't get robbed again. I'll say maybe 29-28 decision win, unanimous. That's my pick for this fight. Moving on to Matheus Camilo versus Gabe Green. Now, this is a super interesting fight, and honestly, there's a few reasons that are impacting who I pick here, and I'll probably end up going with my gut instinct in the end. But the few things I'm thinking about here are that Gabe Green has been out of the cage for 2 years now. He's also making his debut at lightweight against a lightweight prospect in the division right after losing to Brian Battle by KO in the first 20 seconds of their fight. And Gabe Green was a welterweight. He's a pretty large and muscly dude, and I imagine the cut is just going to be rough, and I think it won't help his chin that much in this matchup. The guy just does soak up so much damage in his fights, and I'm just worried for him going into this fight with Matheus Camilo, who's quite dangerous early in my opinion. But the thing about Matheus Camilo that I have been noticing is that, in my opinion at least, as bad as it sounds, I do think he can be broken in the octagon. I can see it in quite a few fights that he's had. He tends to wilt significantly in the second and third rounds of his fights, and someone who applies a lot of pressure and is willing to keep a decent pace for 3 rounds should be able to beat a Camilo if they are cautious and maintain the game plan. So the question is, does Gabe Green come out looking like his usual self or better, or does he come out looking terrible because of the factors I've already mentioned, like the potential drastic weight cut to 155, the 2-year layoff, and the coming off of the KO loss? That's the question, because I really do think that in this fight, this all relies on the shape of Gabe Green, because I do think that Gabe Green, normally, if he even looks slightly better, should be able to beat a Matheus Camilo, and if he doesn't look good or starts making mistakes, I think he just gets put away by Camilo in this fight. So it's pretty 50-50 in my opinion. It'll depend on how he looks on fight night. I think I'll put my faith in the prospect of Matheus Camilo for this one fight, so he will be the pick. But if what I said comes true and he wilts and loses the fight in like the 3rd round, I'ma just say I told you so, guys, because I'ma stay away from this fight in terms of betting on it. So moving on now to the main card, Julian Erosa versus Melquizael Costa. And this is just a reminder for you guys before I get into breaking down the main card fights. If you like what you're watching, please make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe if you're not already. Since I am still a small creator, your support means a ton. But now to get into my predictions for the main card. Both these guys are incredibly active. They both fought like a month ago now and are both looking to jump right back into things. This will be Melquizael Costa's 3rd fight in 2.5 months, which is just insane. I will say right off the bat that I do agree with the odds here. I think that Melquizael Costa should be the favorite going into this one. I think he gets it done against Erosa the majority of the time. I do think that both guys have finishing potential. I could see this fight being a potential inside the distance bet, especially on the side of Julian Erosa. I think the majority of the time, that guy, if he does win, it's by finish. But I've said this about Julian Erosa a bunch in the past. The dude is not super technical on the feet. He's incredibly bad defensively, I'll be honest, and he relies very heavily on his chin and forward pressure to do his work against his opponents, and I think he's just going to get outdone by a superior striker in Melquizael Costa. Something really just tells me he's going to catch Erosa in this fight coming in. I think Erosa just comes in very wildly, swinging away, and he's going to catch him on the back foot with something, maybe a check left hook that stumbles him, and then he ends up putting him away. That's what I can see happening. I also think that Melky is good enough with his grappling to avoid the guillotine of Julian Erosa if he decides to work in his grappling in this fight too. That's my pick for this fight, guys. Melquizael Costa, most likely by KO. I can really see that KO coming. Moving on to Nursulton Ruziboev versus Dustin Stoltzfus. And listen here, guys. Initial gut instinct on this fight was Nursulton Ruziboev all day, and I think I'm going to be sticking with that. The guy is a finisher through and through. He will most likely have the power advantage. He has the higher finishing potential, and he has the overall striking advantage on the feet, in my opinion. He's got solid submissions as well, and he can use his wrestling if he needs to, but he's most recently been choosing to do his best work on the feet from range as a super tall 6'5" middleweight. His only loss in the UFC is to Joaquin Buckley, which is not bad at all considering the run that Buckley is on, and that bout was at welterweight, which is not his natural weight class. Dustin Stoltzfus is good, and he is pretty underrated since I do think he's got a pretty well-rounded game, but he just takes way too much damage on the feet for my liking, and although he is durable, he has been finished by a few guys in the UFC already by KO, and Ruziboev is good enough and powerful enough to find that shot on the feet. I think my prediction for this fight will be Ruziboev by KO, most likely as well, or maybe he does do some solid work and gets a decision. I'd be surprised if Dustin Stoltzfus was able to do solid work and smother Ruziboev on the fence and on the ground, taking him down and holding him down in this fight. I'd really just be surprised if that did happen. So Nursulton Ruziboev is the pick. I feel relatively confident in that. Moving on to Sodiq Yusuff versus Mairon Santos. And in this one, I actually don't even know why Mairon Santos is a favorite over Sodiq Yusuff. This is going to be a rather large step up in opponent quality for him, and honestly, it's going to be a massive test for him moving forward in the division. Sodiq Yusuff, although he is coming off of a 2-fight loss streak to Diego Lopez and Edson Barbosa, he has been looking good the majority of the time in his last 5 fights, probably excluding the Lopez one, of course, but in his last 5 bouts, he's been looking quite solid. He's 2-3 right now, and his only other loss in those 5 fights was to Arnold Allen. Like, come on, guys. He has been fighting at the highest level of competition you could possibly verse in the featherweight division, and he almost got Edson Barbosa out of there completely in the first round of the fight with him. Sodiq is dangerous on the feet. He can use his grappling if he needs to in this fight, and I just think he will have the advantage everywhere going into this one. I think Mairon Santos is dangerous, but he's not the type of guy to rush in like a Diego Lopez to force a firefight with Sodiq Yusuff. I think this will most likely be a fight where Sodiq will be the one leading the dance, trying to push Mairon Santos back and smother him while he's trying to keep his distance. He will need to be very careful when fighting in the pocket, but I think he will be the more accurate fighter, the fighter with more output, and the fighter doing more damage overall. I think Mairon Santos didn't even win his last fight against Francis Marshall, and he did struggle with the striking and wrestling of Francis Marshall quite a bit in that fight. It wasn't just the grappling that did well for Marshall in that fight, it was the striking as well against Mairon Santos. Pretty happy to take the underdog in this one in Sodiq Yusuff to get this one done. It would be a pretty good bounce back win for him, honestly. Moving on now to the co-main event of the evening, Paul Craig versus Rodolfo Bellato, and now this is genuinely a lock of the card if I've ever seen one. If Rodolfo Bellato doesn't go out there and KO Paul Craig in this fight, I would be genuinely in awe and shock of that outcome. Paul Craig literally has nothing on their feet for a lot of fighters, and his main way to win is by getting the fight to the ground and using his submission game. But Paul Craig doesn't even have the best takedowns, so he ends up relying on people jumping into his guard when he falls to the ground or gets knocked down to be able to implement his BJJ. Rodolfo Bellato is not getting taken down in this fight by Paul Craig. He is 100% going to catch Paul Craig in this one. If you want to be above and beyond safe, I know nothing is guaranteed, of course, but to me, above and beyond safe in this matchup is going Rodolfo Bellato by KO or decision. But I really do think Rodolfo Bellato KOs Paul Craig early, probably in the first or second round. Rodolfo's just so powerful, he's more technical on the feed, he always seems to find that big shot on his opponents, and I don't know how Jimmy Crude in his last fight took some of the shots he took in their fight. Big step down in competition from Jimmy Crude in my opinion as well. I think we will start to see a more exciting matchup for Bellato right after this fight. That's my pick. Confident picks list edition for Rodolfo Bellato. Moving on now, finally, to the main event of the card, Gilbert Burns versus Michael Morales. And I'll mention this one for you guys now. Last week for the subscribers poll for the main event, you guys chose Belal Muhammad to win that fight, and unfortunate for you guys, but fortunate for me, JDM was able to get it done. But this week, we have a new poll out for this week's main event, so make sure you go vote on that one on the channel's post. But it does look like everyone is favoring Michael Morales to get the job done, and I'm just gonna say that it's pretty sad to say this, but Gilbert Burns is now that aging vet that is being given to a tough up-and-coming UFC prospect. First it was JDM, and now it's an undefeated prospect, Michael Morales. But the funny thing about this all is that I actually do think Gilbert Burns is still relatively skilled and tough to beat. I know he's 38 years old, but the dude has only been losing to the best of the best in the division, and everyone else he still has been beating. And I do think it's not impossible for him to beat Michael Morales. I really don't think it's impossible. I think he will have his greatest chance if he's able to get this fight to the ground and use his BJJ, but Gilbert's hands aren't terrible either. When someone is closing the distance on him, he does time his shots, his large shots, very well. But this just feels like it really is a tailor-made bad matchup for him for so many reasons. Michael Morales is a great wrestler who most likely won't be taken down in this fight, and at the very least, the takedown won't happen very easily. And Michael Morales also is the bigger, rangier guy by a wide margin. Although it says Michael Morales is only 2 inches taller, he will have the 8-inch reach advantage going into this fight. I also believe that he will be the faster of the two, and the absolute worst punch that seems to catch Gilbert Burns a lot in his career is straight punches, especially the jab. And Michael Morales has a really, really fast and powerful jab, and that's where I think this fight is going to begin and end for the most part. I think Michael Morales will use that range to do quite a bit of damage to Gilbert Burns for the majority of the fight, and I think that potentially by the second or third round, he will have softened Gilbert up enough to get a finish. I could see him getting the KO here. The dude isn't the most polished on the feet, but he is very strong, very powerful, and he just hits hard, guys. That's all it is to it. I think all these attributes adding up are not great for Gilbert, so that will be my official prediction, guys. I'm going to go with Michael Morales to get this one done, and that wraps up my full card predictions and breakdown for the entire UFC Fight Night Burns vs Morales fight card. If you guys have any thoughts or any questions for me regarding the card, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll do my best to respond to every single comment left in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.